Hey, Sound Engraver here. Today we're going to be talking about meter and how to use meter in SuperCollider. Now, as far as I know, SuperCollider doesn't interpret meter like we interpret meter as musicians and as composers, but with a few values and some syntax we can work around that and have SuperCollider output sound in a way that is perceptibly meter to us, the listeners. But before I get into that, I just wanted to mention that not a couple days after posting the video on panning and the difference between panning with stereophiles and monophiles, I came across one of Fieldsteel's videos where he's recording his class session. And he was talking about quadraphonic configuration and surround sound, and he was telling his students that it would be beneficial to, or at least efficient, to convert stereophiles to a monophonic signal. And I thought, I wonder if that can work with panning. And turns out it can. So using some of his code, I put it in the context of my dictionary. So I'm happy to put that video that I looked at in the description below. So with that, we've seen these dictionaries before using the read method for our buffer, but rather than using read, I'm going to use read channel. And when I go to the help file under buffer, you can see that channels is an argument that we can notate and implement. So I did notate it like this. And if you input either 0 or 1, that is essentially converts the stereophonic signal to a monophonic signal. 0 is configured to the left hardware speaker, and 1 being the right hardware speaker. Either or is fine. I just, by habit and also by default, I just go to 0. But with this, and once this is evaluated, and I have evaluated it, we will have our stereophiles be essentially monophiles. Not quite, but it is a monophonic signal. And just in case you don't believe me and want to see it for yourself, let's just go ahead and go back to our path name. Now, if you can recall from previous couple videos, I used glitch, and glitch was the name of my folder for my stereo files. And so, to just show you that they are indeed stereo files, now we have glitch for our stereo, mono for our mono, glitch with the neon folder. Right-clicking this folder and getting info, you can see to the left here that the number of channels is 2 for our stereo. And now if you can remember, in my mono folder, there are sound files that I had previously mixed in Audacity, mixed them down to mono. So you can see notated M here for mono. Same sound, same folder name, but now these are mono files, and you can see that with the number of channels being 1. So, with that in mind, that glitch is my folder for my stereo files. So, having that evaluated previously, I'm just going to go ahead and evaluate a simple play synth for my stereo. And now, because these files are converted to a monophonic signal, we still have to keep the number of channels in our play buff arguments, keep that as 1. That is important, or SuperCollider will spit out, hey, the numbers are mismatched, I don't understand this. So there we have it, our stereo pan here, our name for our stereo pan. And again, this is stereo. You should be hearing excellent panning now. All right, so that sounded like good panning to me. So again, this is I believe, a new and improved way. Not that the way I presented to you last week was ineffective, but anything that is a little cleaner, and if we can use stereo files, I prefer that, stereo files to a monophonic signal, because when we mix down stereo down to mono, I personally believe something is compromised in the audio quality. So just a little tip there. I was very happy to discover that. And with that, we will go to our meter. All right, so in the example for our stereo file with our monophonic signal, you've seen this code before in previous videos. The only thing I'm changing up a little for our meter is the dur key for our duration. Now with SuperCollider, SuperCollider thinks of things as beats. So one beat, essentially we can interpret that as a quarter note in a given meter or time signature. This is going to be a very basic and intuitive demonstration. So one beat being, or the value 1 being 1 quarter note or 1 beat, half of that being a half note, and a quarter of that being, of course, a 16th note. But you can only go so far with these decimal values. And that's because when we think of meter, we think of dotted rhythm, we think of maybe swung rhythm. We also think of simple and compound meter and groupings of notes, maybe, 3 16th notes at a time, or triplets, or all of that. So to go a little bit more intuitive and maybe a little bit more comprehensive, we will use numbers and notate the numbers like so. So 1 still being a beat. Now half is not what we would think of half, being a half note or 2 counts. Half is half a beat. So half in this case is an 8th note. And 1/3 and a group of these right here is essentially one group of triplet 8s. So you heard 1 and 2 and triplet and so on. Very, very interpretive or whatnot. It's not very computer sciencey, this demonstration. So going down, now we're going to explore what I interpreted to be our 6/8 meter, and a dotted quarter plus 3 8th notes. So let's see if you can hear that. One, two, three, four, five, six. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on. The same goes for here. So 3 being 3 8th notes together before you continued on to the next note event. So that was essentially a dotted quarter note. 6/3 would be, and subsequently this group here would make the meter feel it to be 9/8. So 1 dotted half note plus 3 8th notes. I think I have that right. Might have to check that. But here's how it sounds. I'm gonna let's see. We'll start that at 120 beats per minute. That should give us some context. That's rather fast, but 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 and all of that. Maybe I should have started at a slower tempo, but that is the point. All right, so moving along down, our meter is what I interpreted to be 4/4 or 4/4, and one dotted half note. So a note with the note length of 3 quarter notes, just sustained, plus another group of 3 eighth note triplets. One, two, three, two, two, three, 3, 2, 3. I was thinking triplets, yeah, the whole time. 1, 2, 3, triplet, and so on. Next is a little fun. 7/8 is one of my favorite meters, and this I interpreted as a group of 2 plus 2 plus 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And this is the sequence. That might be a little too fast. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So that was the sequence using pseq, but if you randomly selected this, it was quite fun to hear. And so on. So hopefully that gives you some inspiration there. I have to double check this one, but I interpret it as like a 6/16. So in this case, 1/4 of a beat is a 16th note. So it's not a quarter note, it's a 16th note. So group of 3 16th notes and 3 16th notes suspended. So let's see how that sounds. And I think I used this specific meter because of the 16th note there. All right, swung rhythm. Again, this is all interpretation, and I have to explore this a little further. But it's using these numbers here, like 5/4, 4/4, and 5/4. We'll get to this, but 3/2 and 2/3 is a little bit easier to catch. So I just realized I don't think it's swung at all. That may not be the right context. If we look at these numbers, we have a group of 4 16th notes. And I do believe that 5/4 is essentially holding the value for as long as 5 16th notes. It could be a group of 5 16th notes, like university. I use that word when I group 5 together for within the span of one beat. University, dun dun dun, and so on. But I actually think that this is sustaining 5 16th notes before moving on to the next note event. As you can see here, that to me is not swung as much as it is a dotted rhythm. So a quarter note tied to a 16th note plus an eighth note, and so on. So it may be more dotted rhythm than swung rhythm. So I'd have to look a little deeper into that. So a little bit like this. Maybe it sounds a little bit longer, but that dotted rhythm, although feeling a little more stretched, even though this is at 120 beats per minute, it still has that long lagging feel. Now let's try this. So that's probably the most complicated part of this demonstration. So not really swung. I'm feeling more dotted rhythm in all of these examples, but you do get the point that you can add a little bit of sway and lag and that dotted rhythmic feel that can be wonderfully utilized and implemented in contemporary music. So the more I explore and the more I find, I'm happy to show you all of that. Lastly, there's a bit of a trick that I love, and that's mixing a couple of these using the pattern PWRand. Now, PWRand is the same, essentially the same as PRand in that it randomly selects values in a given array. You can see here, embeds values randomly chosen from a list. And actually, if you go to PRand, it says the exact same thing. Well, the only difference between that and PWRand is that it's based on a probability that each item in the list is determined, as you can see, by weights, which should sum to 1. And I actually think of 1 as 100%. So we'll get into that right now. For our first item in this list, oh, I think this was it. Yeah. All right, so that will be our first. And I think yeah, I just needed the pseq. So that will be our first. We're just doing 2 items. And our second one, oh, before I get into that, so remember that these are 4 eighth notes, 1 and 2 and triplet. That is essentially what that is. And the next one, I'm going to make it simple but catchy. I'm going to do a group of 3 16th notes. Now, I'm used to using inf for the number of repeats. In this case, this would not be acceptable. And the reason for that is we need to come across this less than infinity. That was a very ambiguous way of putting it. Let me show you. So I have my 2 items on the list, and we will need our weight values. So with that, we will go ahead and include our weights. Right now, I'm just going to use 50, 50, 0.5, 0.5, and here I can add infinity and move on. So what essentially this is 0.5 is going to determine this list here, this part of the list, item I should say. And this value is going to determine this. So right now, each item has an equal chance, and a good chance, a 50% chance of being picked. And this is why I want to just do it 1 time, or you can do 4 times. Let's just go ahead and play it. Now I'm going to give the first one 1 and 2 and triplet, 1 and 2 and triplet. I'm going to give that a 75% chance to happen. And I forgot to add that to 100 or 1. Now, you're more than welcome to include a different value. It doesn't have to be 1. So if, for instance, based on this weight, we run this pseq, once that pseq is run and you had 4, it's going to run 4 times before choosing the next probability. So in this case, I just like to give it 1 and then have it be that chance that 16th note triplet da, 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 is going to come into play. And so on. So I'm still exploring. There's room for improvement and exploration there. But hopefully this demonstration gives you some ideas on how you can use meter. And again, it is more subjective and more an interpretation of how you hear it and how you would quantize it and line it up in a digital audio workstation. But it's great fun for me to explore some of the rhythm there. So hopefully it inspired you to work in rhythm and work in percussion and MIDI and all of that. And until next time, thank you for watching. Always be on the lookout for some more experimentation in SuperCollider and also Logic Pro, including some original compositions coming up. As always, thank you for watching and listening.